Books. Books. Books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast where I have ceded control as the direct result of an aggressive takeover. I am your host, Grace Todd, writer, editor, book gremlin, and I continue to be held captive by the incomparable Maddie Wood.
I am the captain now. I continue to be the captain.
And I'm doing my best Tom Hanks impression, but so far it has failed to move you.
I mean, he is America's dad, and I don't know, I could work my way around you being my dad.
Can I not be America's dad? I feel like I could be America's dad.
I mean, I'm already envisioning it.
I'd be a great dad.
I'm already here for it. I'm already sad I threw a book at my dad's head.
Hey, I'm proud of you, champ. And I'm going to come to your t-ball game.
Are we going to go throw a ball around in the yard, Dad?
Mm-hmm.
Pa?
Black Iris loves it when you play catch around all of their nice furniture.
I mean, fair. Speaking of paws, we left just as Pa had returned. I can't wait. I'm very excited for the end of this book for you.
Yeah, Daddy is back. This is going to be a daddy episode.
Yeah, we're going to get real daddy with it. So lock in.
If there's one thing I know about classic literature, it's that it's just daddies all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, a turtle. It's daddies. It's just like a nesting doll of broken toy daddy issues. And we're about to get to the tiny little daddy in the center.
The tiniest, smallest little babushka daddy.
The wee little daddy.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. All I've been doing is talking and recapping, and I'm very excited to converse about all the weird things that William Faulkner works into this collection of related, but also he seems like he doesn't care if you really are related short stories that he then published as a novel. So,
all right. So really quick, and this is normally something I foist on Lee, or something I have foisted on Lee historically, but I'm going to try, for those of us who have had a week in between these episodes, instead of the 15 minutes that you and I spent in between these episodes.
Give us a little TLDR.
I'm going to try. All right. We are in Mississippi.
Hell yeah.
We are opening in the very middle of the Civil War. We have two little boys.
Yes.
Baird and Ringo.
Mm-hmm.
Baird and Ringo are maybe siblings, but we don't ever find that out overtly.
Correct.
Baird is a little white boy. Ringo is a little black boy. They live mostly under the care of Granny.
Correct.
Who is the only adult who seems to be any kind of meaningful presence in their life.
There are other adult slave relationships that get discussed, but none of them ever have overwhelmingly large plot points. They're there to caretake, or they'll pop in and then kind of pop out. Granny is the one who is always traveling with them, doing the wagon rides, laundering the mules.
Sure. Okay. Ringo and Baird, they're small children. Dad's away at the war. They are told that the South has lost control of Vicksburg. They immediately murder a Union soldier's horse, not the Union soldier himself, although they think it's the Union soldier. They run inside. They hide under Granny's skirts. The Union soldiers arrive to be like, someone murdered my horse. This is less than ideal. The Union commander, who ultimately shows up on the scene, lets them off and sort of pats them on the head and is like, maybe don't shoot any more horses. We then go into an extended period of mule-related scheming.
Before we scheme, we have to get on the sea of people and drown in the river.
That's right.
Yes.
We've buried the silver in the yard, but then we've unburied the silver.
There it is.
And then we are trying to get the silver somewhere
to
when
Memphis.
It is taken by the Union soldiers. We follow the Union soldiers. We get to the Union lines. There are many, many, many people who are trying to get also to the Union lines because they have been enslaved and are trying to get to more freedom, even though it is a complicated, incomplete freedom. The Union Army wants no part of this. They blow up a bridge. We fall off the bridge. We wind up in the river. We are ultimately pulled out of the river by the Union Army, given a letter wherein we have a bunch of silver and mules unloaded on us, which then leads to an extended period of mule scheming. The mule scheming eventually backfires.
As all good schemes do.
We then, having acquired a sketchy acquaintance who has been assisting in the mule scheming, are drawn by the same sketchy acquaintance into a horse scheme, which considerably raises the stakes.
Well, a horse is bigger than a mule.
And more expensive, one imagines.
Yes, and one was a thoroughbred stallion.
As part of this attempted horse scheming, we are brought into contact with the Gumby man.
Grumby, yeah.
Yeah.
But also Gumby.
Grumby's independents, who are cantering around,
Marauding,
murdering people. They ultimately murder Grammy, who was convinced that they wouldn't murder her because she was a lady and they were Southern gentlemen, and that was absolutely not the case. Baird and Ringo...
Throwing a little shade.
Yeah.
Yep.
Baird and Ringo, now 15 or so, go on a mission for revenge and track down Grumby et al. Along with... What was his name?
Snopes.
No, who got his...
Uncle Buck.
Uncle Buck, who keeps a gun on a string around his neck and tucked into his waistband very safely.
Super safe.
Uncle Buck gets shot through the arm and gives up and heads home. The boys actually do manage to finish their vengeance quest. They murder Grumby after some
scuffling,
take him home, nail him to a wall, cut his hand off, put it on Grammy's grave.
Curse is lifted.
The curse is lifted. Grumby's hand curls and one finger goes down. And then they get back to their house that I want to say I remember getting burned down at some point.
Yes, they are living in the slave quarters of their property.
Okay, and now Daddy is home, and that is where we left off.
Yeah, we are crying into Daddy's beard. We are so excited to see Dad. Man, the smell of Dad. There's a lot of odor-related commentary throughout this book that I'm always just like, I know that smells are like evocative of memories, but like it was a bit much, Will.
And what does Daddy smell like?
Different things at different times. Victory, but also despair, but also fresh rain, but also what a candle is all I'm saying. Where's Daddy John's candle at the old Bath and Body Works? I'm here to smell rain and despair and knowing that you're not going to be victorious and that your ultimate quest to secede has been ruined. So yes, they get back. They are told it's basically all over except for the surrender at Appomattox. Dad John is home, and with him is Drusilla, cousin.
Oh, yeah.
Lady cousin who we met earlier in the story who wanted to go fight with the dad, John. We are just like weeping. We're so excited. We're also exhausted because we've just murdered a man and cut off his hand. And we've been traveling for like 2.5 months with Uncle Buck, and we've had to clean his bullet wound, and we are tired. So that section ends with them just like falling asleep. It's sort of an anticlimactic. It's like he's home and we're asleep. We open then on we're getting more Drusilla backstory. So turns out soon after they see her and you meet her the first time, she goes missing. And Granny had gotten a letter from Aunt Louisa, who is Drusilla's mom, and is like, kind of hope she's with you.
Have you seen my daughter?
Kind of hope. She's not like a full adult, but she is older than them. So like early 20s, like late teens.
Okay.
Aunt Louisa's like, I have maybe incorrectly just been like hoping and assuming she was with you.
My daughter was talking a lot about like
pants.
Vengeance and pants and blood oaths, and then she disappeared, and I just assumed she went to visit her old auntie.
I guess that was wrong. It says, I remember the night we got the letter and found out at last where Drusilla was. It was just before Christmas in 1864, after the Yankees had burned Jefferson and gone away, and we didn't even know for sure if the war was still going on or not. And it says, we hadn't even heard from Father since July, from Carolina, so that now we lived in a world of burned towns and houses and ruined plantations and fields inhabited only by women. Ringo and I were 15 then. We felt almost exactly like we had to eat and sleep and change our clothes in a hotel built only for ladies and children. So also just like very good picture painting of like what it would have been to be a teen who was too young to probably get enlisted or drafted and like stuck at home.
Yeah.
And just like the only people left were ladies.
They're really stuck in this twilight between like childhood and manhood.
Because at this point, at 15, they would have been old enough. But the war is so far on at this time, and it's a bit irrelevant.
Well, and there aren't really any adults
to force them to do anything.
Right.
We come to find that Drusilla did exactly what she said she wanted to do. She goes and fights with John. We get note of a second letter from Aunt Louisa where she's like, I have come to find this terrible, awful thing and that it's my daughter has gone. But some of the language she uses in this is from the letter. But it is not myself I am thinking of, since I am a woman, a mother, a Southern woman, and it has been our lot during the last 4 years to learn to bear anything. But when I think of my husband, who laid down his life to protect a heritage of courageous men and spotless women looking down from heaven upon a daughter who had deliberately cast away that for which he died, it's like, oh... And then the first line from Bayard in this first person was, that's how it sounded. And they're talking about how he's reading it and how, as I said before, Drusilla was engaged and her husband or her fiance dies in Shiloh. And that's supposed to be the thing that's like pushed her over the edge. But it says, there had been reserved for Drusilla the highest destiny of a Southern woman, to be the bride widow of a lost cause.
Oh.
Ooh, right in the gut.
Ouch.
And how Drusilla had not only thrown that away, she had not only become a lost woman and ashamed to her father's memory, but she was now living in a word that Aunt Louisa would not even repeat, but that Granny knew what it was, though at least, thank God, that father and Drusilla were not actually any blood kin. So we come to find out that Aunt Louisa has decided that because she ran away to fight for John, that means her and John must be involved.
Are they?
No.
Oh, okay.
But that becomes the narrative that like defines her life.
Great.
Is that there's no way that she could have been out with this group of soldiers sleeping in a tent with her cousin and they couldn't have not been fighting.
Great.
And so
Good.
Drusilla, they come home from the war and Drusilla doesn't go home.
I wouldn't either.
She stays with them. She continues to cut her hair super short. She keeps wearing pants. She keeps doing manual labor. They talk about how she's like helps them rebuild like a pen, and she's like working in like they've got a sawmill, and she's like doing all this manual labor. And they come to find out that she hasn't let her mom know that they're back. She just has been like, nah, I'm good. And the mom sends a more local friend to like check on things. It's all under this guise of like, I'm just here to check on you, you poor child, like,
poor baby.
And then they very quickly, she like doesn't want anything to do with them. She stays away from them. She stays in the woods like doing manual labor. And so in their minds, the only reason that she could be doing that is because she's pregnant and she doesn't want them to see her. And that's the only reason she could be wearing mannish clothes. And it's the only reason she could be doing any of this.
Oh my God.
And poor Drusilla's like, just let me live. Like, just let me live.
Just leave me to my flannel shirts.
And my sensible, coveralls. And let me do manual labor and leave me alone. And they're like, no. So slowly these hordes of like well-meaning, very hard air quote there, start to descend upon the house.
Oh my God.
You have our sympathies. We got to take care of you. And like without your mom here. And then they send for her mom.
Oh God.
Mom arrives and is like, y'all getting married.
Oh no.
And
where's Daddy in all of this?
Daddy's like, buck up, soldier.
What? What do you mean, buck up, soldier?
I mean,
is he gonna marry? What is?
Aunt Louisa comes back. She comes to their house. She makes Drusilla wear a dress. Oh. And Bayard goes on and on about how like this is the thing that breaks her. It's actually very sad that she's like not allowed to wear. She has to go back to wearing dresses. And he like goes on and on about like he literally says it breaks her.
She finally found herself. Leave her alone.
And they were just like, no. It's so clear that they don't know what to make of this like woman who doesn't want to be or do the things that they think. And so when they're talking about the good friend who comes to like check on her, she says that she's sitting there holding her parasol and her shawl, of course, and looking around like when Drusilla would come out of the house or from around the corner, it would not just be a thin, sunburned girl in a man's shirt and pants, but maybe something like a tame panther or a bear. It's like they don't know what to make of this person. And so they're like, I know what'll fix it. Put a dress back on.
No, Drusilla, no.
And so they're like, dress it is. It's basically like you're ruining the family. Everything that your dad died for. You're just like a disgrace. And the only way you can make it better is to wear a dress and marry your cousin.
This is a huge bummer.
Yeah, but also like such an interesting choice for William Faulkner to have made in this story.
Yeah.
Especially with like, it's such an interesting odd contrast even to the rest of the story. The whole like coming of age narrative and the vengeance and all that stuff is like very on brand. And then it's like, and then here's this section where we're going to break a woman's soul.
Well, this makes me wonder, in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, there was a huge problem when all of the men came back and were like, hey, all that independence and
JK
pants that you got to have, we're taking that back. You can't have that anymore.
That was like a special like dispensation because like we were busy.
And I'd never thought about it before, but that must have also happened during the Civil War. Like that must have been a consistent problem, especially in communities that were either industrial or hardcore agricultural, where you have women who are doing very serious
manual labor
that they would not have been doing otherwise, whose husbands come home and are like, okay,
you're done.
That's it. Get back in the kitchen. And
not even in this case, like we're talking about a level of aristocracy where it's like, you wouldn't have even, it's like, go back to a life of literally nothing.
Yeah. And like
knitting.
It makes me wonder.
Needlework.
Faulkner knew some women who that happened to.
Oh, very possible. I didn't really think about that, but you have to think that that has to have been the case after every conflict. World War I, Civil War, like all of those have got to have a certain element of the agency that comes with wartime.
Yeah, with having to underpin the war effort.
Correct.
The men are all gone.
I mean, there was a lot of that also for Black soldiers who came back from World War II and are like, I just like risked my life and like fought. And now I'm like, once again, a very much second-class marginalized citizen. Mm-hmm. And that's like an era of the civil rights era, like that doesn't ever get talked about because you always like skip right to the 60s.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of like pillar like building work that happens from the NAACP perspective in that like right after the post-war. Not related, but here we are putting that history and Southern studies minor to use.
I really thought you were going to be like, here we are putting that dress back on Drusilla.
Here we are putting her just back in her place. Poor Drusilla.
Poor Drusilla.
Broken Drusilla. So this is all happening and John's just kind of like, whatevs. Which is just what you want.
How useful.
He's like very already involved in like, so the war is over. We are like right in the start of Reconstruction, just like super tumultuous. And this is happening and overlaid against the first voting that's going to happen post-war.
Which, if I recall correctly, was super chill and nothing bad happened.
You are remembering it exactly correct. It was a super chill, like Age of Enlightenment kind of nonviolent time period. Mm-hmm. Faulkner goes into some description of how there are these Northerners coming down that are getting all of the formerly enslaved people to register as Republicans. You have to remember Lincoln's the very first Republican.
Right.
They are the party of Lincoln. They're like going to go hard on that until like the Dixiecrats, and then they switch and then they change their mind, which is also ironically right around the time that Faulkner is writing this.
Oh.
And so they talk about how the first black person is going to be on the ballot running for county marshal. And Ringo comes home and is like, I'm not a N-word anymore. I've been abolished, is what he says. I've been abolished. And I'm a Negro now. So this is where that change in language comes. It's like,
okay,
I'm not an N-word, I'm a Negro. And that's like the term that they like continue to use is like for freed folks. And he's like, and there's a Negro running for county marshal. And John gets word of this and is like, no.
Uh-oh.
So the day that Aunt Louise is like, you guys are getting married, you're going to go down to the courthouse, and then we're going to have a reception here. And so then people won't know that you've been like gallivanting around alone. Again, this weird, I'm going to stand on propriety in a time when no one has cared about it at all. Again, this like what must have been very harsh whiplash of snapping back into like societal quote unquote norms for the time period after all of that being thrown out the window during the war.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that some people are always going to do that, right? Like,
it's a comfort. It's like a safety zone for people. But Faulkner makes you very aware, and he like is very clear that like these women, all they're concerned about is getting Drusilla married. And Drusilla's like, this is the worst. I am a broken human. And John's like, I don't care. I just have to stop this black dude from getting elected.
oh my God.
And so they're like, you're going to take her into town, into the like town, like the city hall, and get married and not really tell anyone and then come back. So the two of them get in the wagon and they go downtown, and instead they kill two people.
Oh my God. What?
That are trying to like push this election forward.
See, it's the thing about this book is stuff keeps happening where I'm like, oh my God, poor Drusilla. And then you're like, and then Drusilla went and committed some racial terrorism. And I'm like, right, Drusilla.
Yep.
All of these people.
Yes.
And these people are all monsters.
So John goes in, he kills these two people and is like, no black dudes are getting elected. I am now he has a true I'm the captain now.
Oh God.
Moment. He goes in, he takes the ballot box and he says, this is Drusilla. She is now in charge of the election. She's going to count the votes. We're going to go back to my house and we're going to vote at my house.
Ooh,
so he takes the ballot box and they all get back, and who is waiting for them but a sea of old ladies that are like, how was the wedding? And they were like, we murdered two people.
We committed racial terrorism
and also,
instead.
And Drusilla's like, we're not worried about that right now. We're voting. Except she's not voting. She's a woman.
I was going to say, Drusilla.
It's a weird thing to stand on.
Committing terrorism against your own interests.
Yes. And so they're all like, oh my God, what? The conversation is, so you're not married, she said. I forgot, Drusilla said. You forgot? You forgot? Drusilla said, now Aunt Louisa looked at us. She looked along the line of us sitting there in our saddles. She looked at me too, just like she did the others, like she had never seen me before. And who are these, pray? Your wedding train of forgetters? Your groomsmen of murder and robbery? They came to vote, Drusilla said. To vote, Aunt Louisa said. To vote. Since you have forced your mother and brother to live under a roof of license and adultery, you think you can also force them to live in a polling booth refuge from violence and bloodshed, do you? Bring me that box. And she's like, no. And so this is like a weird place where she stands up and she says, no, this is an election. Don't you understand? I am voting commissioner. So it's very much like I am the captain. And in this weird instance, I'm going to stand up to you, but not about wearing a dress or marrying my cousin. It's very confusing.
It's weird to watch white supremacy galvanize and unite people in real time.
And also, like, be so strong that it usurps other things that you won't fight.
Yeah.
So then they vote, and obviously they all vote against the black man, and he doesn't win.
Drusilla's the original white feminist girl boss.
Yes. You've got it. And that's,
oh no.
And that's it. They're like surrounded by all of his former soldiers, and they're all like cheering for them, like, yay, John, yay, Drusilla. And that's how the chapter ends.
How do the boys feel about this?
There's no real commentary from them. Besides, Bayard starts this section by being like, I should have known that this is how it would go down. And there's a lot of commentary around how these women have no sense of the larger picture of what's happening. All they care about is the propriety of this wedding, and that they could have picked any other day to have it on, but they're so self-consumed with the wedding that it doesn't even occur to them that it's also the day that this election is happening, and that it's this big contentious thing.
So is the implication that if they hadn't forced them into town to get married, that they wouldn't have done a terrorism?
Maybe. Or that... Unclear.
Fair. Interesting.
I don't think Faulkner cares. It doesn't serve his purpose. Much like Ringo finding a box of Union stationery that never gets explained. There's some of this that Faulkner's just like, I am the captain. And he's reminding us of that in this moment.
At the end of the day, Faulkner is always the captain.
I do want to give a shout out to my college professor, Dr. Bob Brinkmeyer, who works, or I don't know if he still is, the director of the Institute for Southern Studies, who probably, if listened to this, would be like, bitch, I taught you like so much better than the way that you were recounting this book. So I'm really sorry, Dr. Brinkmeyer.
Well,
sorry for that.
Look, this podcast is not meant to be a stand-in for university level literature courses. I'm sorry to say.
Thank God. All right. So then we've got this last section. Last section was never published up until they published the full book.
Wait, hang on. I gotta strap in. I gotta get a little more beverage, and I gotta get situated.
Yeah, get your haunches in a comfy spot.
Yeah.
Get in that saddle, because we're moving forward in time like several years.
Okay, I'm strapped. I'm braced.
She's
strapped on.
There's a lot to that. So we open with Bayard drinking a Coke, which I found it very odd that he like specifically says he opens a Coke, but he opens a Coke. He's in someone else's house, someone that's never really been mentioned before.
Oh.
And this guy flings his door open of his room, and Bayard thinks to himself, I should have known, I should have been prepared, or maybe I was prepared because I remember how I closed the book carefully, even marking the place before I rose. And so his professor is there, who he lives with, to tell him that his dad is been killed.
Oh!
This is several years in the future. He's about 24. He is in law school, so he's not at home. His dad wants him to go into law, so he is in law school. Ringo has come for him.
Oh.
And so they get on their horses and they ride back. You then learn the backstory of how this comes to be. This is where you get some of that, like, Ringo definitely is feeling this loss in the way you would feel the loss of a parent, but in a much more vengeful way than Bayard ends up feeling.
Okay. So Bayard has gone away and become a fancy pants university man.
Correct. Ringo has stayed home.
Presumably operating as daddy's little sidekick.
Maybe. Unclear.
Okay.
What you do get is like how dad has like rebuilt his fortune. So this is another situation where it turns out that John has helped rebuild the railroad in Jefferson, which is the town closest to them.
Okay.
And he has done it in conjunction with this other man, Redman, I think is his last name. And they get into it in the process and split ways, split the company. John's dad has made out well. And this guy is not made out well, but like Bayard recounts how like his dad just like can't leave this dude alone. Like just has to keep digging at him.
Like picking at the scab of, yeah, okay.
Turns out this man then goes to run for office, like a local office. And then all of a sudden, Bayard's dad, John's running. And it's very clear it's like just to piss this dude off. And so it's this...
This is a model of Southern masculinity I am familiar with.
Same.
I've known these guys.
I've met this person. But he just like can't give it up. Bayard's like very aware of this and even is like reflective enough to be like, if he had just like let this go, but the guy comes and he shoots him. After like these years of antagonizing him, he gets tired of it and he shoots him.
Well,
and Ringo's like, we should kill him.
That seems like a bad idea.
So they get back to the house and a group of John's like compatriots are there. Some of them are dudes that were in his regiment. Some of them are his friends. And they're all just like waiting outside the house
For
Baird to get back.
because
and like
he's the heir, the scion of
assume the mantle and also make the call of what are we doing to this dude? How are we avenging? Mm-hmm. And in their mind, there is no not avenging.
Sure.
And he like pushes them off until the next day.
You know, it's almost like this is the kind of mindset that would get you embroiled in some kind of unwinnable, intractable conflict that like guts your entire society from the inside out.
It's weird.
Just so that you can maintain an illusion of power over a subset of society that you've deemed lesser in some fashion.
It's wild.
But I'm probably overthinking it.
You're probably reading more into it than historically we could find any kind of proof of.
That's true.
But I like where your head's at.
This is the problem with my frail lady brains. Is
They just go wild.
Yeah, I spin out. And
I will tell you, I almost think William Faulkner has a lady brain, because if anyone can spin out on a sentence, it's my boy Willie F. Holy God. Oh, Godfrey. So he gets home. We find out that John's sister is now living with them, as well as Drusilla. They're married. She's there.
Wait, so he did marry Drusilla in the end?
Yes.
I'm sure she's been having a great time as the wife of a guy that she definitely wanted to marry.
Well, fun fact, you get like some recounting from Baird that sometime before they were like walking in the garden. We get a lot of description of garden. And Aunt Jenny, who is John's sister, has moved in with them and brought some clippings from her garden, like just exhaustive garden. And that she embraces him and is like, "Kiss me, Baird." So there's this like weird... Is it just like a cry for attention because she's sad? Do they really like each other? It's like they resist, but not really. They kiss.
Kiss, not... Okay.
Yes, it's like embrace me, like...
So Drusilla and Baird have been a thing at some point.
They've smooched.
So she and Daddy were a marriage in name only.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think there's ever any illusion that that's not the case.
Sure.
It read very like, I'm trapped. This is like a thing I can control.
Okay.
Which, understandable.
Sure.
So he gets home, he shoos off Dad's former compatriots and is like, tomorrow. Like, just like, let me get in the house. And they're like, ugh. Fine, I've got bloodlust. But I guess
wanted to do a terrorism today. Tomorrow's not as good. I have plans in the afternoon.
Like, I guess, like, I already had a chub, but like, I guess I'll go take care of it. Oh.
Now I'm gonna have to go do a smaller terrorism somewhere else to tide myself over.
God, I'm gonna have to go be mean to someone lesser than me. Ugh, stupid.
Gross.
Ugh. So they leave. He gets in the house. He's met by his Aunt Jenny, who he makes this like elaborate point several times of being like, she is wise. She has wise eyes. She's wise. So we are supposed to take that Jenny is the voice of reason.
She's the new granny.
Yes.
Okay.
She is like trying to bring a calming presence. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get this very interesting contrast. He gets into the room. Dad's laid out in his like Confederate finery. He walks out to them. He keeps saying he's about to start panting, which I'm assuming is Faulkner's way of being like a panic attack. Mm-hmm. But the use of the word panting like made me like sort of giggle a little bit, and it was a very serious situation. He's like, I'm gonna start panting any moment. It's just like like I get it, but it's an odd turn of phrase. It's distracting. And Jenny's basically like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to be your dad. You can be a different person.
You can be your own man. You can envision a new and different version of the South.
And he's basically like, no, I can't like let everyone, like, this is the expectation.
One thing I will say about this book, it's not on the nose at all.
No.
The symbolism is so elusive and
it has a subtlety that you would not believe.
Like rose water in the moonlight.
Like Confederate jasmine up a gondola, up a pergola. just beautiful, smells so sweet.
The softest and most subtle perfume.
What if there was just like Southern Lady ASMR? And I told her that if she brought that damn macaroni and cheese to the church potluck again, when I was going to bring macaroni and cheese, that I would murder her the way that my grandpappy taught me to. I think I should start a channel. There's an audience for this. I feel confident. Anyway,
Yep.
there is this moment. He's had Jenny's like voice of reason. Meanwhile, who is standing next to Dad's dead body, pistols in hand?
Oh, okay.
Drusilla.
Oh, okay. That is actually not who I expected.
See, I told you there'd be some twists. She's standing there and she's basically like, here are these 2 pistols. You know what to do with them, my guy.
Anyone you can kill, I can kill better.
I can kill anyone better than you. No, I can't. Yes, I can. And she, beautiful little baby doll tears in her eyes, like, you're gonna do this, vengeance, and this is amazing. And she's like basically horny for it.
Okay.
She's horny for the violence.
Okay, Drusilla.
And the revenge of it all. She's just like, take them, Bayard, she said in the same tone which she had said, kiss me last summer.
Oh, no.
Already pressing into my hands, watching me with that passionate and voracious exaltation, speaking in a voice fainting and passionate with promise. Take them, I've kept them for you. I give them to you. Oh, you will thank me. You will remember me who put into your hands what they say is an attribute only of gods, who took what belongs to heaven and gave it to you. Do you feel them? The long, true barrels, true of justice, and triggers, you have fired them. Quick as retribution, the 2 of them slender and invincible. She wants to f*** these guns. She's so horny for these pistols, guys. I felt weird reading it. And the fact that I just had to read it out loud to the general public feels weirder, but I needed everyone to know. And so he takes...
That is phallic.
I mean, yeah.
Woo!
Like, get my gal a vibe and like get her out of this loveless marriage, because she's so horny for these guns.
She is losing her mind.
And this final chapter is called An Odor of Verbena. It's all about her. She like talks about when she comes back from the war that the only thing that would mask the scent of like war and death was verbena. So she always has it on her. And so she like dramatically takes her sprig of verbena and like crushes it up. And it's like, I abjure verbena forevermore. Now let me look at you, how beautiful you are, young, to be permitted to kill, to be permitted vengeance, to take into your bare hands the fire of heaven that cast down Lucifer.
Wow. Woo. Okay.
So then she does this thing where she's given him the pistols. He like has these pistols in his hand and is like, ugh. She reaches down and like kisses one of his hands that's holding the pistol. And it says, because they are wise, women are, a touch, lips or fingers, and the knowledge, even clairvoyance, goes straight to the heart without bothering the laggard brain at all. She stood erect now, staring at me with intolerable and amazed incredulity, which occupied her face alone for a whole minute, while her eyes were completely empty. And then she goes on, why, he's not, and I kissed his hand. So she realizes that he's not going to take these pistols and like do what she wants.
Wow. Just from kissing his hand.
Just from like a smooch on the hand. The clairvoyance of women.
Well, we are all
witches.
We're not actually people. We're babies, but also magic, but also babies. We're magic babies.
We're virgin magic babies.
Mm-hmm. Virgin magic baby horse.
Who also are witches.
Yeah.
Coming soon to a theater near you. This breaks her brain. She starts to like maniacally laugh.
Oh no.
And like can't stop They have to like physically like restrain her and take her to her bed.
Oh no.
Baird goes to go after her and Jenny's like, no, like you let that settle.
Just leave that alone.
And this is where she's like, you don't have to be your dad. You don't have to do this. And he's like, but I have to. You like, look at how she reacted. Like I have to. The next morning, he is trying to prepare to go and do whatever it is he's going to do. And he doesn't sleep very much. He goes to try to talk to Drusilla before he leaves. And it reiterates that he's not going to do what she wants. And she goes back to maniacally laughing. And he's like, great. So he gets on his horse. He gets his dad's horse and goes to town. Aunt Jenny once again tries to stop him before he leaves. Like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, no, I got to do something. He gets all the way there. He's got this, like, all of his dad's compatriot men are, like, backing him up and are like, yeah, man.
It's time for murder.
You're going to do it. You're going to do it. And Ringo's there, as always.
Are there not laws in this place?
Well, no, because it's 1870 tops in Mississippi.
Surely there's a sheriff of some kind who, when he's not busy extrajudicially murdering people of color, could maybe be persuaded to care about this murder.
I don't know. Nah.
Fair enough.
Nah, I think there's the assumption that they're going to take care of it.
That is the sign of a healthy and well-ordered society.
Yep. And so Ringo's like, I'm going to go with you. And Bayard's like, no, you're not. They like get all the way outside this guy's office. So there's like also this like gaggle of people. Like this guy knows they're coming.
Also, wouldn't Ringo as a now young black man, if he were to roll up and participate in the murder of this presumably white guy, wouldn't that be a huge problem for him?
I don't.
In the South, in the 18...
I guess this is very dependent, and they don't say like exact year. This would be very dependent on the place, because there were places where like you got full elections worth of black people that like for a very short window.
Right, sure.
And so I guess would depend. There is reference to the guy who originally lost has now been elected. And so maybe we're in that window. They don't really talk about it. But no, I mean, you would think it would be like a problematic solution. But this is where you do get the reinforcement that Ringo is more their dad.
Right.
If John is their dad.
I guess what I'm asking in part is, even if it is within that window, based on when the book was written...
Oh, yeah.
Is William Faulkner expecting us to just know off the page that if Ringo is to participate in this, that it will be the death of him? That that he won't survive it because he is a black man.
No, I don't think he cared about that part of the narrative. Like, that's my true read, is that the reason that Bayard doesn't want Ringo to go is because of Bayard knows what he's going to do when he gets in there, which is not what Ringo would do. And so maybe it is it's like a protection thing. Like Bayard's trying to protect him from doing something that he knows would ultimately be detrimental. I'm not saying no. So they have this back and forth. He's like, you're coming with me. No, you're not. You're coming with me. No, you're not. He does say like he can see that Ringo's got a gun. He can see the outline of a pistol. And he's like, you're not coming with me. So instead, he's like walking on. And now this George Wyatt, who's one of his dad's compatriots, is like, hey, you got a gun? Well, he's like, do you have a Derringer, which is a type of pistol? And he's like, no. He's like, good. They're tricky things to fool with. Couldn't nobody but Colonel ever handle one right? I never could. So you take this. I tried it this morning and I know it's right. And he gives him a pistol. And he says the same thing happened to him that happened to Drusilla last night when she kissed my hand. Something communicated by touch, straight to the simple code by which he lived, without going through the brain at all, so that he too stood suddenly back, the pistol in his hand, staring at me with his pale, outraged eyes, and speaking in a whisper thin with fury. Who are you? Is your name Sartoris? By God, if you don't kill him, I'm going to. And he says he laughs, and that's what Drusilla said. I'm tending to this. You stay out of it. I don't need any help. He goes in. The guy is sitting at the door. or sitting at his desk. He's a lawyer. He's sitting at the desk. He's got a gun on the desk. Bayard, we come to find, doesn't bring a gun with him at all. He lets the guy get 2 shots off on him. The guy stands up and runs out, gets on the first train he can find, and leaves town. And that's kind of how it ends, in this assumption that, like, Bayard is breaking the cycle.
Huh.
Yeah.
So, and then the guy shoots at him but misses?
Yep. He takes, like, 2 shots for the sake of, I took the 2 shots, he came in, but Bayard comes in unarmed and is like, I'm doing this, we're showing people, but, like, I'm not going to continue this. And so then he gets back, Drusilla is gone, and all that's left is a sprig of verbena on his pillow, and that's how it ends.
So Drusilla and Daddy, they're like pretty on the nose, like avatars of the South itself.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Like,
yes, and in weird ways, no, for Drusilla. Dad, definitely.
well, I just feel like, because Drusilla, right, she starts out, she does everything she's supposed to. She gets married, she has this,
She's engaged, and then she's like broken.
And then he goes off and gets killed, and that turns her into this like rougher, tougher, militant, like the South itself. Mm-hmm. And then she comes back from the war, and as much as she wants to continue being rougher, tougher, and militant, the old manners of the aristocracy like smush her back into this suffocating cage of manners that makes her very unhappy, but the violence is still lurking within her all the time. And then ultimately, when one of the sons of the South fails to choose to follow that violence, she ceases to exist.
Correct.
Cool, thanks.
You're welcome.
Glad I could check
well
check
done.
in with that. Yeah, thanks.
Well done. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that she's the character he picks to be that overwhelming archetype. Because there is a part of me it's not only like society, the time that is squishing her back, but you could also argue it's the North squishing the South back.
Yeah, well, because I feel like she's the home front, and then Daddy is the like militaristic Southern upper crust, and between them they're like an avatar for the whole thing. I don't know why I'm making a scissoring gesture as I say
but
this.
Here we are.
But here we are.
I would like to think that Drusilla would want that.
It's such a bummer that she was a domestic terror. Like she could have been cool.
That's the thing. I think that's why I think she's so interesting, because she is also a lot of things that are not... for a man to choose a woman as the archetype in such a major way, that is just, for that time, I feel like very interesting.
It is.
And to also add these layers of her own personal rebellion, I guess it's easier to do through a woman than it would have been through a male character.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a long tradition of anthropomorphizing the South as a woman.
True. I do wonder, when he wrote the first one, knowing that they were like written sort of pseudo separately and published, when he wrote that first one, is this really like where he thought it would go? Because some of these characters are featured in some of his other books, like tangentially. And so did it start as like him being like, I need to make some money and I need to publish something. So here's like a silly little story about these 2 little boys who shoot a Union soldier's horse out from under him.
Yeah.
And it evolved into something else. I don't know. Maybe we're not giving William Faulkner enough credit.
As my babe Jess would say, I'd buy that for $1.
It doesn't not make sense.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that he like tells this story that is very archetypal and very on the nose, but also is willing to use Bayard to poke some fun at some of it at the same time, especially around Drusilla and the whole like the role of Southern womanhood and what that means, and how much that was part of a narrative of why they were fighting to begin with.
Yeah.
Which is so different from why they were, well, it's all related, but it's all also part of the memory making of this wasn't about slavery. This was about our honor. This was about, like, this is such a time period. Like, this is the height of all of that.
Right.
And so the fact that he would choose to poke at it at all as a writer from Mississippi, I do think is interesting.
Yeah, and ballsy.
And ballsy, yeah, for sure.
Well, and especially thinking about that, this being written at the height of the spinning up of the lost cause narrative, I'm really struck by the recurring motif in several of the quotes that you read from in both in the last episode and in this one, where he opens things by saying, I should have known.
I mean, I should have known should be the unofficial motto of the Confederacy. I mean, well, like, there is something to this, like, duh. Like, in retrospect, so much of that is, well, of course, that's probably what was going to happen.
Right.
You
well,
know?
And all of these characters are fulfilling their own archetypes. They're behaving exactly according to the rules of the society in which they live without even seeming to really think about it. And
with the exception, I feel like, of Baird, because I do think that character of this, like, I'm going to break the cycle is a little bit, that's not what, you know, ends up being the case, especially for that period. And so him being self-aware in that way of, like, I should have known, hindsight's 20/20.
Well, right, and that's why he is the one constantly being like, I should have known. I didn't because I expected better, because I, for whatever reason, have matured past this or have been placed outside of it, maybe because of my unconventional for whatever reason.
I think he's an aspirational character in that, like, he is maybe what good old Will wishes were what was happening.
Right, but he's consistently expecting people to act either in their own self-interest or
in a
logic,
way
in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
And instead they are doing things that ultimately harm themselves or the people around them because of these kind of high-flown societal narratives. And so he's, you know, it's that repetition of, I should have known, I should have known, I should have known. I should not have expected better. And yet here we are.
And yet here we are.
And now Drusilla is laughing maniacally and dissolving into the ether and being replaced by a sprig of verbena.
That's, I mean, yes. That is, he's nothing if not a lover of a little bit of dramatic flair.
Mm-hmm. Whether or not he was, you know, pro-Confederacy, what Southern author does not love a little bit of dramatic flair?
I mean, very true. Look at his mustache.
Can you write a book below the Mason-Dixon without it having some dramatic flair? I don't think it's allowed.
I don't think they'll publish it.
I should have known that if I tried to write a book below the Mason-Dixon without some dramatic flair,
it wouldn't get published. I should have known
that the ghost of Tennessee Williams and William Faulkner
would rise up,
show up in my bedroom to be like, baby, no.
Who do you think you are? How dare? How dare?
Not one streetcar? Anyway.
Nothing full of desire.
No verbena. What are you doing?
There's no lights in August. Come on. I have read a lot of Southern lit, and to find someone in the 1930s who also, it's very brief, obviously it's just like only like those last two sections, but that would even really be discussing Reconstruction also is very interesting, just because for a lot of especially white Southerners, that's like a we don't talk about, and are much more focused because like Lost Cause stuff doesn't like really ramp up until the turn of the century. And so that like 1870s period is like, for a lot of white Southerners at the time, it would have been kind of shameful in some ways because you did see Black people getting elected. You get the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Like, you get voting. And I mean, then they spend the next, like, you know, up until right now, trying to disenfranchise people from that very thing. But it also was a lot of groveling, of a lot of like, you got to sign this thing to say that you're never going to do anything against the country. You have to like sign these oaths to get your land and your rights back. Like, it was a purposefully humbling experience. And so one that like doesn't really get a lot of light in fiction, because it's like, we're just gonna, this is either a glorification of the war or the South. I feel like this is one of the, and I'm obviously not, I feel like he's one of the more famous people to be writing at this time and be willing to be a little critical.
And that's important. I mean, I think that myth making is so pernicious and so effective.
There is no greater propaganda campaign than the one that was waged by the United Daughters of the Confederacy in the aftermath of the Civil War.
I think they're about to lose their tax-exempt status.
I know.
And I'm soups okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we as a country in a need to like self-soothe and placate and like re-stitch ourselves back together, or however you want to phrase that, just like extended for so long. You just can't, there's not tons of other examples where a loser gets so glorified.
Yeah.
In the way that happens after the Civil War.
Well, and I think fiction
played a huge role.
Yeah,
in
like
that.
was and is a huge part of that. Because one of the things that I think happened is that Northerners kind of love Southern fiction. They like reading about the South as if they're reading about like a foreign country.
Yes. They're
like, oh, it's so exotic and adventurous.
Oh, they're so slow. So beautifully slow.
And there is, there's like
and that's where real ladies live. That's what I feel like. It's a lot of, and it's all very tied to the like femininity of the South.
Yeah, it's an exoticization. It's a sort of othering, but like an alluring othering, which made it, I think, very easy for a certain kind of fiction to take hold that was about this sort of, like, it's the pre-war South as Atlantis, just this like beautiful lost city, this glittering society that sank into the sea and was never seen again.
It's the Gone with the Wind effect.
Yeah.
You can lay almost all of it at Margaret Mitchell's door. Like, I had a college professor that was like, that book is the worst thing that ever happened to the South, which is like a huge statement. But like from a, like what...
I'd buy it.
What culturally the South meant and like became to non-Southerners.
Yeah, I was gonna say that and
Dukes of Hazzard.
No, the Klan movie.
Oh yes,
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation,
which is based on a book called The Klansman by Thomas Dixon.
Oh, I always forget that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well there we go. So Gone with the Wind and
and we can have Woodrow Wilson to thank for that, for showing it at the White House.
Gross.
Soup's gross, but nothing like more heavily reinforces that like we have to protect our ladies and our Southern womanhood than Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, no,
it's basically the entire narrative.
Yep.
I mean, isn't it a lot easier to swallow in the aftermath that you were at least doing it for this like great noble cause? Obviously, like I understand the very human desire to do that, not from a full like belief in the Confederacy, but like the human nature to want to self-soothe yourself after a defeat or give yourself a narrative that makes you feel better about it. What I don't understand is how all of us were just like, this for the next 100 years.
Yeah, and that, to be fair, is a question for a, I don't know, history podcast. But like, everyone loves to self-soothe with a narrative. No one needs to self-soothe with a narrative more than someone who knows that they have committed atrocities.
Also, no one needs to self-soothe with a narrative that's a national propaganda campaign that also extends for 150 years.
Yeah, we shouldn't have let them do that. That was bad.
But we were very happy to, like, going on 100 years after the war, and that's where...
We're still letting them do it.
Yes, but I mean, like, I guess from a much more public and, like, collective... Like, we were letting the UDC determine what went into textbooks, like... I mean, yes.
But yes.
But, like, it was a much more, like, a federally funded situation.
I mean, I remember learning circa, like, elementary school that the war was about states' rights.
Yes.
And if you were like, states' rights to what? They'd be like, what?
Who? Moving on.
Don't ask me that.
Gettysburg.
I don't want to tell you.
July 1863. And that's where I do think Faulkner's like, there's a lot of, I think, eye rolling about him in general, because he can get real in his own weeds.
I mean,
but can't they? I mean, everyone.
Can't we all?
Who can't? And the reality is his weeds are really beautifully written. So like, even if you're in them, like, you're at least experiencing some like profound prose. But I am struck by the fact of like who he is and what it would have meant to a certain extent societally for him to be publishing stuff that was even remotely critical or remotely non-glorifying. Not even,
yeah.
I wouldn't even call this critical, but like just didn't follow that like everyone was happy and everything was great and then the dirty old union came in and ruined it.
Granted, you're the one who read it, but like it sounded pretty critical to me, or at least
as critical as you're going to get in like the 1930s.
Sure, but and not to I don't like to lionize. I don't believe in having heroes in a general sense. I don't like to lionize people.
I don't think he
ever.
would be one that I would maybe pick anyway, but
I think we very frequently look back at time periods and we look back at time periods and think that the prevailing viewpoint was the only viewpoint. Looking back to the 1930s, which is, I think, the kind of peak lost cause myth building. We aren't quite at the civil rights era, but like we're between the wars.
You're between the wars. You've gotten like monuments are going up, if not already up, but you are in like some really rough racial tensions.
Yes.
That are getting worse every day. And this is another thing that I think is, I appreciate a lot of the narrative that comes out about the South, both antebellum period and like around the Civil War, is almost entirely focused on people of privilege. Mm-hmm. It is very much like everyone lived on a plantation. And again, like this very Gone with the Wind kind of, which is the majority of people, as of course, when you think about it logically, did not live in a plantation, did not live, they were pretty poor, pretty rural, pretty agricultural. And he gets some of those characters in this in a way that I appreciate. What's also interesting is that that's who you see this like rise in the 30s and 20s of folks, like really horrendous racial is coming for the most part from like poor white people in like I'm going to find a way to make someone worse off than me. Mm-hmm. And while a lot of these people shared a lot of similarities, like in socioeconomic, they were doing a lot of the same work. It was that very much like I got to find someone to shit on. And so you see not that rich white people weren't also incredibly racist.
They were also, everyone was a monster. Every white person
is a monster.
In 1938 was low-key kind of a piece of shit.
But it is like, when people are socioeconomically the same, you're always going to look for a reason that you can make yourself feel better than someone else. And so this is where you get a ton of that. And you're like very heavy in lynchings. And this is just like a very rough time period in the United States in general. And so to also put all of that in context and still put something out like this that is not in that glorification realm, I'm like, William Faulkner, you're like kind of cool.
Yeah,
kind of cool.
I think it's good to be reminded that no time period is a monolith, and that there are always people, no matter what is happening, no matter what era you're in, no matter how much accepted wisdom is falling on the side of monstrousness, you will always find people who are writing or making art, or you will always find people being like,
not me.
I don't know. I just don't know about this. I think maybe this sucks. I think maybe this sucks and you suck. Have you considered that?
Have you considered that perhaps you suck?
And
just a thought.
They don't always succeed. And I think, unfortunately, they very frequently don't succeed. But they are there. And it's
correct.
Good and important to remember that they're there. Even if what they are doing is imperfect or doesn't go as far as we would like it to, at least they're doing it.
Which is, I think, obviously, like you said, no decade's a monolith, and I think very true to remember now. Even memory making and memory building is a constant. And I think what has been so hard for folks in the last 5 years is the role that a lot of people have attached to their own identity in what it means to be a Southerner.
And
And it's really hard when you press people on their identity or try to tell them or make them see the reality that the identity that they have chosen or that they feel has been passed down to them might be problematic. And that's a really uncomfy place. And I think that is the real, yes, all the racially charged racism, all the racial terrorism, all the violence, all of that also all helped enforce a lot of people's identity. And it's so interesting how people can compartmentalize what that identity means. Or that you can think about yourself, as I experienced a lot firsthand. I worked at a Civil War museum during the height of all the monuments coming down, and the way people would react as if you had like personally said you were a Confederate. Like it was a wild association, and it comes from, I think, also a very strong narrative that a lot of Southerners have around family and your roots and like where you come from, and like nothing happens in a vacuum.
No. And
nothing happens in a vacuum, and like all of it all will always catch up with you. And I love that William Faulkner felt like he could be aspirational enough to think that his main character could break a cycle, when in reality, like, the likelihood of that happening in real life would have been so slim. But I like that he was trying.
yeah, well, and you know, a few people get to break a cycle every generation. Not a lot of them, but a few.
Sure, and who's to say it wouldn't be Bayard?
Yeah.
Who's to say?
I believe in Baird.
I do too. I believe in whatever he's out there trying, doing.
Baird became a civil rights lawyer.
Can you imagine?
I hope so.
Man, do I hope so.
So my question for you, having kind of parsed through it as we just have, is like, in terms of coming here, kicking the door in, throwing things at my head, forcibly taking control of my podcast, why this book? Like, what drew you to it very specifically? Like, how does it speak to you?
I read this book, like I said earlier, I read this book in college, and I remember being really struck by it then, in part because it was the first time I'd read Faulkner. And I think the first time you read Faulkner, it's like very striking because, you know, one of the questions you asked me was, who would I recommend that's alive today? And I just don't think that there's anyone else who really writes prose in the same way. I don't really have an alive comparison. I'm sure maybe they exist, but... So I remember being very struck by reading it. I just remembered really loving it, and then I hadn't touched it. And a lot has happened since I read it. And I really did want to see, like, did I find it as insightful and as striking as I did when I was 19 and, like, very, fresh-eyed. And I was, like I said, I was a Southern Studies minor, which is not as Klan-like as it sounds. It was really just like a Southern lit and culture minor. And so I was so immersed in this, and it's also something that I haven't really like kept up with it at all. So I did want to see if it hit the same way, and it did in a different way. I definitely didn't find it as like mind-blowing as I did the first time, and I definitely was more like, what is the narrative purpose of like half of this? But I still, like, I plowed through that in 3 nights. Like, it still was good, and I still found some of the lost cause stuff as important now as I did then. And it's still my favorite Faulkner. And so when we talked about this and I was like, I'll do a Faulkner, that was the first one that came to mind. And I don't regret it, because the other ones are good. I just, for some reason, this one's my fave.
It's close to your heart.
It is. And I got to read the like old version of it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful edition. Oh, read us the note in the front.
Oh, yes, it's got a hand signature. It says, to Uncle Herman from Bud and Madge, Xmas 1943. So I also love that this was gifted during the war, and it is a wartime book.
Oh, yeah. I hope Uncle Bud enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope that he loved it. Let me see if I can find it. There's only one single thing lined in the entire book.
Oh, what is it?
And it is a line. It's not even a full line. And it's talking about Drusilla when she gets back and says, "In the garments not alone of a man, but of a common private soldier." It's like not even a significant line.
Well, it was significant to somebody.
Uncle Herman was like, this changes everything by Godfrey. This changes it all. But yeah, there's no other markings in it besides that. And I thought I was like, is this on purpose?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I enjoyed reading the vintage copy of it as well. I thought about buying a new version of it, but I'm glad I didn't.
I do love an old book. I always have to buy trade paperbacks of everything I do for this podcast because I scribble all over them.
Fair. It was very hard for me not to. And so I just filled it with sticky notes instead.
Sticky notes are good.
Yeah, sticky notes will do.
I do. It's very funny because I don't always come prepared with like a contemporarily analogous author. And I didn't even do this on purpose, but
is it Margaret Mitchell?
It is. I love Margaret Mitchell so much.
I thought so.
Completely coincidentally, not at all on purpose. This very morning, I finished reading Lauren Groff's The Vaster Wilds.
Why is that name so familiar? Did she write something else?
She's written several books. The last one of hers I had read was Matrix, which was also incredible. But The Vaster Wilds, specifically, the quality of the prose and the way that the descriptions hone in very, very small and then sort of they wax and wane in scale really does genuinely remind me of Faulkner and of the Faulkner I have read.
I mean, that's high praise. Oh, she's Fates and Furies. That's the one I know.
The Vaster Wilds was incredible. I cannot recommend it enough. To be clear, you have read The Unvanquished. I have not. My recollection of Faulkner, however, from the Faulkner that I have read, is very, very beautiful prose that underpins a narrative that is not always super tidy or satisfying.
No.
But instead leaves you just kind of coasting on like, and that's the human condition, champ.
It's very pat on the back. And that's why sometimes it's also, I think, very hard for me to be like, did he mean anything deeper by this? Or was he just doodling along, like writing these like chunks of like really beautiful descriptor? And he was like, oh, I got to put like a little bit of plot in this. Hold on. And that's probably, I mean, he has he's like a Nobel laureate. Like, I'm probably not giving him anywhere near as much, or he's a Pulitzer winner. I'm not giving him anywhere near enough credit. I'm sure he was very insightful as a human, but his stuff always does strike me as it's like, were you more interested in just writing a bunch of like really intense descriptors and just like remember that they had to be strung along with something else?
All right. Well, I won't go that far, but to the point of beautiful prose underpinning a narrative that is going to refuse to give you tidy catharsis, The Vaster Wilds very much, I would say, is like paralleling Faulkner on that front.
I'm glad you had one because I like struggled to think of someone that I could recommend.
That combination of beautiful prose and a little bit of angst, maybe, but it's a really good book. It's kind of a mine.
Hell yeah. I'm for that like once or twice a year.
A ringing endorsement. I enjoyed it very much. I was sad it was over.
That's always like, that's the best. I will say this wrapped up in a way that I was like, like I was pleased.
Yeah.
And there is something to being able to set down a book when you're done with it and feel pleased. It was great.
You're like, thank you very
much. I am done with you. That's how I like to feel, unless I'm like looking to be upset.
I'd say that's fair.
Which sometimes we all are.
Look, I mean, I'm the wrong person to speak to this because I like books to step on my face. I like to have my heart carved out of my chest and shown to me by fiction. It's how I prefer my books, my plays, honestly, my cinema. I
save all of that for my sad cowboy tunes.
I'm a slut for catharsis.
I used to be. I'm like a reformed slut for catharsis.
It's the more horrible things I experience in life, the more I need it. Like, this is how I process life, apparently. Don't know why.
I love that for you.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's I'm not saying I recommend it, or like your mileage will very much vary, but this is how my brain works.
That's, I mean, very fair. I like a good wrecker every once in a while.
Yeah, that's fair.
I tend towards the southern wreckers.
Love a good southern wrecker.
But there's a lot to choose from. I think very few subgenres of fiction wreck in the way that some southern wreckers wreck.
I'd say that is fair and accurate.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you would like to?
Read a Faulkner, everyone. Don't be scared. It is one of those authors that I feel like always gets tossed around of like, ugh. And like, here's the thing, just don't read The Sound and the Fury.
Yeah.
Or don't read As I Lay Dying.
There you go.
He has a lot of like really wonderful short stories.
Read a short Faulkner.
There's a lot of ways to get some Faulkner in your life. And I really do think everyone should read him at least once.
Yeah.
And buy it from an independent bookstore.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say,
I'm wearing a t-shirt from my favorite independent bookstore. Shout out to Prairie Lights in Iowa City. A wonderful little local small bookstore. But find one in your area. Shop independent. Shop small. Buy a used book.
yeah.
Just like read a book. Or don't. Don't feel any shame about sometimes not reading books. I'm everything and everyone.
Whatever you're doing, Maddie is here to encourage you.
I want to be your cheerleader. So, like, if you want someone to hype you, again, my Instagram is @Madeline9. And if you just, like, send me a DM and are like, hype me about this thing, I swear to God, if you send me a dick pic, I will report you so fast. I will burn you down. But if you want to be hyped about a normal thing, like choosing to read or not read, hit me up.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. I should really do this professionally. I should really word vomit professionally. Delightful.
Well, thanks so much for being here, for kicking the door down, throwing things at my head. The bump will go away eventually, I'm pretty sure.
You look fetching with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate your time, your attention, your Faulkner.
Thanks for having me. This was super fun. You gave me an excuse to read a book I hadn't read in 10 years.
That's what I'm here for.
And anytime.
Great. And thank you, all of you out there, for joining us on this little adventure. I don't know yet, but Maddie may or may not give me control of the recording equipment again in time to do another episode next week.
I don't know. I like being the captain.
I'm hopeful that I will someday escape. And, yeah.
We'll see you later.
We'll see you later.
Hang 10.
And
hang loose.
Hang loose. Hang so loose. Don't hang too loose. And in the meantime, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author. Because they could sure use the love. Bye.